Welcome back. We're live on LinkedIn. Welcome back. We are live on LinkedIn. And we almost didn't make it due to a series of unfortunate events, right, Maria? What just happened, Maria?
We couldn't hear each other. We couldn't see each other. I
But
tried
that's
different things. You did as well.
but that's what happens when you try to do an event live about bad luck in academic publishing and things that can go wrong when you write a paper, you submit a paper, you get peer reviews back on a paper, you pick a journal, all of those things, right, Maria? It must have happened to you hundreds of times.
Yes, it did. And some you can help, some you can't.
Anyway, are you feeling lucky, Maria? I've got my coin here. Are you feeling lucky? Heads or tails?
Oh, tails.
Ah, it's heads. So that means we're in really good shape for this afternoon's event. We are on episode 13 of How Do You Solve a Problem with Maria and Gareth. And we're going to be talking this afternoon, this evening, this morning about a series, a few unfortunate things that can definitely happen to your research article as you move it through the process. And if you're listening to this live on LinkedIn, do give us a comment on the LinkedIn feed. You can ask us questions. They'll appear for us. We can then answer them for you, hopefully live during the event, if not in future follow-up. If you're listening to this as a recording embedded on the LinkedIn feed, let's get going, Maria. Piece of bad luck number one, choosing the wrong journal. Has this happened to you?
Yes. So it's usually when you really want to publish in something that's really high impact, so that loads of people see it, but then you have a very specialized piece of research, and it's a very narrow-minded focus of a story, which is best suited for more specialist papers and journals than big, broad science or nature.
So this can happen very easily. This can happen to all researchers. You write a paper and you get it ready to submit to a journal, and it turns out that the journal that you've decided to submit to with your research is not the best fit. And so what happens is immediately after you make your submission, you end up getting rejected or desk rejected, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But it takes a lot of time, and it's bad luck for you as a researcher because you're sucking up that valuable time. You don't have a lot of time between writing and submitting. So journal selection, very important, isn't it, Maria?
Yes, it's always good to read the aims and scope of the journal, and to figure out if they've published something similar in the last year or so to what you have. Even if they haven't, you can still, um, in your cover letter, explain why what you did is suitable for the readership of the journal.
Yeah, it's really, really important. So our first piece of bad luck, the first thing that we're going to talk about is about journal selection. Make sure you do put the time in to selecting a good journal for your paper. Journal selection is really important. It can speed up your publication, helps you to maximize impact, and also it's important to help you detect fake journals. And you don't want to fall foul of this particular piece of bad luck in the process, because you want your paper to get published quickly, and you want your paper, once it's out there, to stand out from all the other sunflowers, right? 2 million papers published every year, more or less, 30,000 per month just in the medical and health sciences. So our first piece of dodgy bad luck that can befall you as a researcher is a poor piece of a poor piece of journal selection. I'm just reading one of the comments that's come in on LinkedIn. Got totally distracted there. Let's talk about bad luck. Piece of bad luck number two, and that's rejection before peer review. Maria is an expert on peer review. This happens all the time, right, Maria?
Right, and it's mainly because the little small things that you think about when you when you finish writing your paper, when you finish writing the bulk of your paper, are the ones that editors to screen your paper for before it goes to peer review look for in the first place. They look at conflict of interest statements. They look to see if all the authors have been properly identified, if you have contact information, if you have data access statements, conflict of interest statements, all of the good things that you don't want to think about, that you give yourself no time to do, those are the ones that get picked up first.
Because what happens with papers is they get submitted into journals, and at the editorial office, before the paper gets sent out for peer review, the editorial office will perform a series of checks on your paper. And it's particularly true for medical and health science research. They won't send the paper out for peer review if they see something is not quite right with the checklist that they have, or they decide at the outset, at the editorial office stage, that the paper is perhaps not within the journal scope. So not only picking the right journal, and that can be a piece of bad luck for you as a researcher if you pick the wrong journal, but also getting desk rejected before peer review. This can also be a catastrophe, a piece of bad luck, right, Maria?
Yes, because you've gone to all the trouble and you don't even have feedback on what you've written, because it's only the editors that looked at your paper, not the subject matter experts. So the thing you know from this experience, if you get desk rejected, is that you have to try harder next time.
It's so true. And what I usually advise people, what we usually do advise people in our SciTrain events is, if you get desk rejected, try and turn that into a positive thing, because of course what you've done is you've saved a lot of time with your paper potentially. Although it feels like terribly bad luck, you've submitted your paper to Nature, it's gotten rejected within less than 24 hours, as used to happen to me all the time, unfortunately. Like, I had a friend in Australia, Maria, who actually got rejected before they even submitted their paper. Have you ever heard that one before? But, you know, you've got to be careful.
How do you get rejected before you submit it?
Because of the time difference, because of the dateline, because of the time difference. It should be a positive, because you've saved yourself a lot of time. But do have a look at our checklist for criteria that desk editors consider. Make sure that your submission fits with the journal scope. Make sure your article has a clear message, and so on and so forth, to avoid that second piece of potential bad luck. It's important to get your English right. We've all seen this before as well. If the English in your paper is not as good as the journal is expecting, then that could, of course, be another reason for quick desk rejection. What's your message? This is important as well. Make sure that your editors have a clear view of the message. Very important, right, Maria? You do lots of checks on papers that come into the editorial office. The message has to be right.
The message has to be right, and you need to highlight the key concepts and the key findings in the right places. So you need to make sure that you write in your cover letter to the editors what your paper brings to the subject, to the field. Why is it novel? Why it's relevant? Why it's important? And make it extremely clear in the title and abstract as well, because those are the things that people, the editors, and most of the readers will go through first to check whether they want to read more.
We do these events for fun, but actually what we're trying to do is provide like help and assistance for researchers. That's our goal at SciTrain. So it's important, when you pick a journal, take time over that to get it right. When you put your paper together, take time over it with the checklist that we provide to get that right, so that you don't fall foul of this editorial office pre-peer review check. Which brings us on to piece of bad luck number 3. What about this one, Maria? You skipped the guidelines.
So this happens quite a lot when I see that people want to submit to journals, for instance, that don't accept case reports, and they've written a case report. They want to submit to journals that don't accept reviews, and they've written a review. So sometimes you think in your head that this journal publishes articles that are really interesting to me, but they may be very focused on just original research papers, and you may have written something different, or something that doesn't really fall within their scope, or you have not provided the level of evidence, or you have not included a checklist. Those are all of the things that can happen.
It's really important. And this is why we recommend when you've selected a journal, before you make a submission, do get in touch with the editor, make a pre-submission inquiry, talk to the editor before you do make that submission so that you maximize your chances of getting the paper out for peer review, but also you don't end up getting rejected because you haven't read the author guidelines, right, Maria? This is our piece of bad luck number 3.
Very important. You have to figure out how to convey the soundness of your research, how to convey the reliability and validity in a way that's immediately apparent to whoever is reading it. And usually they may be people that know something of the area, but are not particular experts in what you're describing. So you have to make sure that your writing is readable, that you don't have jargon that experts are not, non-experts are not going to understand, that you focused on real world applications of what you studied.
It feels like bad luck, but higher impact factor journals. Joe, if you're listening to this, yes, we are going to mention higher impact factor journals in our presentation today. They reject 9.5 out of 10 of all the submissions that they get. So you need to be in that top 10%. How do you get your submission into that top 10% so that you get sent out for peer review? Well, you do it by carefully picking the journal before you start, not submitting work that's completely out of scope, completely inappropriate, getting the messaging right with the article for that journal, and selling the paper to the journal, especially higher impact factor journals where your editors and editorial teams are not specifically going to be experts in your subject area. So it's got to be broad. High impact factor journals have a general readership, of course, and that's why it's important to check the guidelines, make sure you follow the instructions, and make sure that your paper stays within the scope of the journal. Preparation is key, right, Maria?
Yes, that saves you a lot of trouble at the end. So just tell people the things that are obvious to you, but they don't know. Why is this important? Why is it interesting? Why have you cured cancer in this particular mouse? What's new? What's challenging? What do you plan to do with the things that you've discovered? So you are solving problems. That's what you do with your research. Tell people what you solved. Tell them what remains to be solved. Tell them where you're thinking about going next. A lot of people have difficulty with this one because they think that they're going to be scooped if they talk too much about their future plans. But you don't have to say that much. You don't have to go into details. You just need to say, we were thinking about this, and then we thought about the implications of this other real world problem in the area. I recently reviewed a paper on how transmission of other respiratory viruses was declined with COVID-19 measures, like isolation measures, because everyone was wearing a mask. And that's hopefully everyone is considering this when they're writing epidemiology papers. 2010, 2020, and 2021 were not years like the others.
Absolutely, absolutely. People worry about getting scooped, and that's why we recommend the use of preprint platforms. If you're listening to this, shout out to all of our friends at the different preprint platforms. But yeah, put what you're going to do next into the discussion of your paper. That way other people can't scoop you and they have to cite you. That's a bit of an aside, but that is also a great piece of advice. So let's imagine for a moment that we've successfully navigated the minefield, the shark-infested waters of journal selection, initial manuscript submission, and getting the paper sent out for peer review. That's all fine. That's great. Congratulations. You're in the top 5-10% at your journal. Bad luck number 4, and Maria's an expert on this, dealing with feedback that feels really, really negative. Tough luck, you got bad peer reviewer feedback. Maria?
Well, the things to know here is that people view feedback in different ways, and people view their role as a reviewer in different ways. So, see here, slide 13, it's completely bad luck. This is the worst kind of feedback, is no feedback. You just say, meh. The reviewer says that no, they don't agree, and they tell you nothing of why they don't agree. Or the reviewer says yes, they completely agree, and still say nothing of why they agree or not. Because then you're stuck with maybe differing opinions. Maybe the editor can't really tell you what's going on. You don't know what to prioritize. Maybe if you're asked to resubmit, you're not really sure what you're going to do. This is the worst. Like really very narrow, very, very short reviews.
From an editor's perspective, this is also the worst kind of peer review. Either really, really short and really, really positive. We get this often. Just publish it as is. Great paper, fantastic piece of work. That's completely non-informative. It's completely a waste of time for editors and also for authors, because you want to get feedback from peer review that will help you to improve your paper. That's the whole point of peer review. Unfortunately, though, many, if not most, peer reviewers don't view the process that way. They look at it as a way to attack authors and find ways to kill pieces of research. Maria gave me a hard time when we were putting this presentation together, but I thought it would be better to leave slide 13 blank. It's unlucky, isn't it, to have much on your 13th slide, but how can we effectively handle peer review comments, Maria?
So, this is a professional situation. So, always be professional, be polite, write your response with comments, address each comment from each reviewer in your response to the editor. And remember that you have to convince the editor that you've taken the reviewer's comments seriously. You don't know if they're going to go back to the reviewer. Um, Hopefully, they will, and they will have some more feedback for you. But the editor can make a decision at this point. And whenever you just say, thank you for your insightful comment, which is something we see a lot, that's not helpful. That's not helpful. You have to actually make sure you address the subject, the content of the comment, and explain how you solve the issue.
I reckon this is probably the most commonly asked question that we get from researchers in our many SciTrain events: how to deal with negative comments that come back in peer review. As Maria said, it's a professional situation. So top tip, don't respond immediately. Don't write an angry email to the editor straight away. I always used to do that, I must admit. Like, I was one for like getting really angry really quickly with the reviews that came back on my papers, but it's worth taking time, maybe a few days, calm down. The comments won't be that bad, and follow our checklist for managing peer review comments. Your goal here, as Maria mentioned, is to convince the editor that you are in the right, that your paper should be accepted, right, Maria?
Yes, and to do that, the best possible scenario is to think of how the editor is framing his response as well. They collect reviews from several reviewers, and then they tell you something, which is you should focus on this or you should prioritize that. Not the best editors won't just pass on reviewer comments to you and let you decide from yourself. They will tell you focus on this, prioritize that, and resubmit or not, and give you a deadline. And it's really important to figure out whether you can comply to the deadline, whether you have to do more experiments, whether you can just rewrite something and get it back. Um, either or, take advantage of the fact that you're communicating with a journal editor.
That's the key word, communicate. Communicate is key. Don't be afraid to communicate. We see this often as well. Researchers are a little bit afraid to talk to editors, but if you have any questions, if you have any comments or any feedback that you need to get from your reviews, just ask the editor. They'd love it if you got in touch. Article submitting is a bit like rolling the dice, but what we do at SciTrain is we help you to make sure that your papers have the highest possible chance of eventual acceptance. And you don't have to spend as much time reformatting as our friend here giving us feedback on this slide. Oh no, I got rejected. I'm reformatting my paper again and again and again. It all comes down to journal selection, communicating with editors, following all the guidelines, making pre-submission inquiries, and dealing effectively with those review comments. And here's another of Maria's favorite questions. I know it's piece of bad luck number 5. You've done some work, you send the paper in, and the reviewers come back with, I need to see more data. What are you going to do about that one, Maria?
Well, first you need to make sure that you're in a position to gather more data if it's really necessary. But first evaluate whether it's really necessary. Maybe you already have the data. Maybe you just didn't present it because in your paper or include it in your figures because you didn't think it was relevant. Some reviewers may think it is relevant. Some reviewers want to see all of your controls. Some reviewers are really keen for you to show them the raw data. And you have to be prepared to place your data in a repository if necessary, to place your protocol in a repository. You have all of those things ready to be inspected by whoever the editor finds necessary. So what this is not good is whenever whenever reviewers ask for more data, and then you give them more data and they keep asking for more data.
Right. You have to be careful, and it's completely acceptable, by the way, as Maria will attest, to go to the editor over email and say, this was a very expensive experiment, or we only had so much time on this piece of equipment, or we were only given so much access to this particular kind of microscope, as used to be the case in my research career. I cannot collect more data. I have to publish what I have. And that's, by the way, a completely acceptable response. We have a quick question from Dr. Jaboob. Forgive my pronunciation. What if the reviewers request unacceptable revisions based on their understanding and they have a limited knowledge? How are you going to explain to the editor that the reviewer is actually being silly, Maria?
Well, first, you don't use words like silly or that they have a limited knowledge, because you don't know whether they have a limited knowledge. What you know is what they requested of you. And if you think it's not reasonable, if you think it's not necessary, if you think that you may explain your results in a different way that does not require more data or more revisions, then write to the editor directly and explain why you think that this particular experiment is not informative, is going to waste resources that you don't have, and it's going to waste time in an effort to give the editor some chance to know that your research is novel and that he or she will get more citations to their journal if they publish novel research faster.
Exactly. There's really, the most important point here is that if you have any questions or any concerns, or you feel that the reviewers are not being fair, or perhaps they've come at your paper with a limited understanding or an incomplete understanding, your first step will be to explain that clearly and politely, as Maria's emphasized, to the editor. And this is a very common situation in peer review, and we call this one moving the goalposts, right? Where you've sent a paper in to a journal, it's gotten reviewed, great, you got the comments back, you make the changes, and the paper goes back to the same reviewers or different reviewers, and they ask for different things. So, this is, unacceptable. At this point, you need to talk to the editor, because the second round of reviews, right, Maria, they can't then be asking for different things again to be done to the paper.
Well, the thing is that's what you said, that they go to the same reviewers. Sometimes they don't go to the same reviewers. The reviewer may not have accepted or may not have time to review your revision. So it may go to someone different that now has a different perspective. It's the editor's job to balance all that and to tell you whether or not it's important to do the the experiments that weren't there in the first place, in the first revision. And if it is important, and if you do need to do them, it's the editor's job to extend your deadline. But the best possible scenario is that you talk to them and you figure out a way to appease reviewer without it being completely unfair to everyone.
Yeah, that's the point. And if you feel that you're being unfairly treated, talk to the editors we've mentioned or get in touch with us. We can help you to put together an effective correspondence to the editor that will hopefully have the right effect. Piece of bad luck number 6, and I love this one. This again is a very common piece of feedback that we get from authors. Why is it taking so long for my paper to get processed? It can take an eternity, right, Maria?
It can take a long, long time. It can take a long, long time to find reviewers as well. So if your paper is in a subject area that is very niche, it can take a long time to find someone within your niche subject area that doesn't have a conflict of interest with you. And it's important that they don't. It's important you haven't collaborated with them in the recent past. It's important that you haven't applied for a job for that. It's all of those things are important, and editors have to take that into account when selecting reviewers. And then whenever they send out an invitation, the reviewers may decline, of course. They don't have to accept. It's voluntary labor. They may not have the time, they may not have the chance to do a proper job. All of that takes a long time, and your paper is not the only one. There's lots in the queue that this is going on. So be patient, and if you feel like there are actual real chances that your the timeliness of your paper is going to elapse during this process, then once again talk to the editor, write to the journal and say that if it's going to take too long, you may withdraw your submission and take it to another place.
I've done that. I've definitely done that in the past. Like, it's just taking too long for the paper to get reviewed at one journal. I'm going to go to another one. We've got some ideal times on this slide, by the way. General rule of thumb, if your paper's been with a journal for about 8 weeks, that's the time that you'd want to start thinking about writing to the editor. 6 to 8 weeks. If you haven't heard anything back, have a quick email, send an email to the editor. But most journals these days, in the age of newfangled technology and all that cool stuff, will have a submission system. Even Scholar One and Editorial Manager, which are 20 years old and all that stuff, they'll still tell you where your paper is in the system. They'll still tell you that it's been sent for review. It's back with the editor. So you are able to write, be polite, be constructive, get in touch with the editor and ask if your paper is having an issue. And our piece of bad luck number 7 is about authorship, right, Maria? Crisis, revisions, disagreements and delays. This has happened to me. I've submitted a paper with a bunch of authors, and then one of them's decided they just don't want to be an author on the paper anymore. That's really unfortunate.
It is, and I have to now show Holly's comment here, that it's that you're writing in a niche field where experts are in countries where they aren't permitted to review articles from your country. That can happen. That is quite specific, quite narrow, but it can happen. It's not your responsibility to find reviewers. It's the editor's responsibility to find reviewers. You can suggest, you can find other people, you may know other people, you may suggest reviewers, but ultimately, if you think it's taking too long, and if you think that other people would be best suited to review your paper, make suggestions, talk to the editor, and tell them that this is a really narrow field and that you are concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, many publishers don't allow their editors to use author-suggested peer reviewers, but nevertheless, we still recommend that you do put the suggestions that you have into your cover letter. That's important, so that they're there for the editor in case the editor wants to use them. And just quickly on this issue of author crises, revisions, disagreements, and delays. I've seen a number of situations like this, both from my own research perspective. Somebody wants to leave a paper. There's a fight about data, a fight about fossils, access to fossils in my case. Or indeed, we get quite a lot of these kinds of inquiries at the editorial office. Hey, I've just remembered that 2 more authors need to be added to this paper after the paper's been accepted, which is, of course, a little bit dodgy, right, Maria?
Yes, you can always think that this is gift authorship, that authors are just trying to get a hold of their friends and saying, hey, I have this paper that's been accepted and you may want to join in because you'll be best cited. No, this is not an issue that is easily solved, and this is why there is a system called credit, which is not perfect, but it's what we have right now, that tells you at the outset, whenever you submit a paper, what each author did to contribute to writing the paper. So if you at some point in the process want to add an author, it may well be that during the revision you asked somebody else to do experiments for you and they will need to be added as an author, or they provided a bit of analysis that you hadn't thought of before. But that is a feedback that you'll need to give to the editor, exactly that this person contributed to the revisions, this person contributed to the writing, not just I've added 2 authors and I'm saying nothing else. This
It's
is
bad luck.
really dodgy. It's bad luck. Your reputation with the editor will not be good.
Takes a lot of paperwork too, like when we've dealt with this at our editorial office, lots of forms that need to be filled in by all of the authors. Any change like this, especially late in the process, and in this example it happened after the paper had already been accepted, you immediately start to think, oh, did you really forget to add 2 authors? That's just a classic case probably of gifting authorship on a paper to some colleagues. It's a little bit dodgy. And with that, a little bit over time, but that's okay. It's unlucky for you, probably, if you're listening to this. We are at the end of our latest episode of How Do You Solve a Problem with Maria and Gareth. What are we going to talk about next time, Maria?
Oh, I don't know. Good luck. It would be good.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening to us on LinkedIn. Do give us your comments and feedback. And don't forget to follow SciTrain.com. Thank you, Maria. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye.